right, the next thing we're going to do is try to create 100 bouncing balls. So we first got a ball to show up on the screen, then we got it to move left and right. Hopefully you've got it to bounce around the screen itself. We did all that stuff in here where we, the steps in order to make that happen was we overrode the JPanel class. We overrode the paint component method. First thing we did is super paint component, set the background color. But really, here's our thing. We drew a ball right here. We were getting ready to move it by doing something to its X, maybe did something to its Y as well. And then we checked if it should bounce off the wall. So there's really 3 steps: draw it, move it, and check if it needs to bounce, and then change its direction based on that. And then we had our delay loop down here, and then this repaint. So this process that we did is awesome, but if I want 100 balls, I'm like, holy cow, I'd have to create 100 X variables, like an X1, X2, X3, X4. I'd have to, call this fill oval 100 times, and then I'd have to move them all, and then I'd have to change it 100 times, and I'd have to check if all of them bounce 100 different times. This is crazy. So what we should do is just create a ball class that stores the things that are important, let's say, to a ball. So here we are now using our knowledge of object orientation to see if this works. I'm going to show you a finished product first. So here's our goal over the next 2 or 3 videos, however many videos it takes, is I have all these balls. Now yours are probably bouncing all over the place. I also made some stick figures. That was just testing out some stick figures. You can really make anything. We're just doing balls, but I also made some stick figures and randomly had them moving as well. So we're going to have these balls bouncing all around the screen. I only have 10 of them right now, maybe eventually have 100. We want to eventually have a mouse listener where if we click on a ball, it should delete. No, that one's not deleting. Well, that one wasn't created with it. Oh, there's a nice red ball. I just realized that it could randomly generate the same background color. That's troubles. But we want to be able to delete balls. I also want to be able to, those are listeners, which are way down the road, but we'll give that. And then we have a button up here that says click me. If I click it, it produces a ball. Every time I click it, it randomly throws a ball on the screen. So I can add balls by clicking on this button. I can delete balls by clicking with mouse listeners. This is all our goal. It's going to be awesome. But how do we get all these balls? Like, how do they know they're all bouncing? We really need to create a ball class. So instead of me coding it this time, what I'm going to do this time is show you the finished product. I strongly encourage that you pause the video at any time and type in, give it a try yourself. Don't just copy and paste the code, type it in, pause as I talk about something, you type it, see if you understand it, then rewind, play the whole thing, but I'm going to talk very, very fast. All right, here we go. The ball class. What defines a ball? So I have to import the packages. We just make a class called ball. It doesn't have the public static void main, but I decided that a ball is going to be determined. What are the variables that determine what a ball is or fields? It needs an X and Y location of where it is on the screen. I decided to make a radius variable and an X speed variable. So I'm declaring these variables here. I also decided to make a color variable called C. I then have a constructor, and what's the constructor's job is to initialize these variables up here. So the whole purpose of the constructor is to put things into those variables. So I accepted all of those variables, and then I threw them up in there. So there is my constructor right there. I also have a default constructor. So I've made 2 constructors of the ball class, and this default constructor randomizes all the X's, the Y's, the radius, the X speed, and you would probably have a Y speed variable as well. A lot of different things you can do, but I randomize it and I pick ranges that are good. So this would be a great time to pause and put all this in here and say, hey, I can make this ball class. I can do this. And we don't even need any of the methods that I have at the bottom yet. Just understanding that when you create an object of a class, you need some fields. You need a constructor to initialize those fields, and then I just made a default one that randomizes them all. So I can either build a ball and place it on the screen with a certain radius and a certain speed and a certain color, or I could say, just give me a ball, and it will randomize the location on the screen, its radius, and I pick values. This is going to be, times 40 is the range of values, plus 5 is where it starts. So it's going to be between 5 and 44. And then here's a random speed between 1 and 4. And then here's a random color, which is using RGB values, multiplying by 256 and casting to an int will randomly give you a number between 0 and 255. So that's a random red, a random green, and random blue. So that's how you randomly generate a color. So that's pretty good stuff. That's our color, or that's our ball class right now. Let's suppose we're done with it. We got our ball class set up. All we have are variables and constructors. So then we run back over, and I made a new, I know we were in animate panel before, but do you remember animate panel? We were just creating the things by hand, but now let's see if we can do it this way. Now, I know there's a lot of extra stuff in here. Disregard a lot of this stuff. but we'll just start with this line of code. This is saying, all right, I am going to declare a variable called B1 that is a type of ball. And then inside the constructor of the ball panel class, I am actually going to initialize the ball. So here I am just creating one object of the ball class, passing it a location, a radius or a diameter, I think, the speed of it, and a color. So I used the first constructor of the ball class and built a ball. Or I could, instead of doing that, so line 10 is creating one ball. Line 11 is saying, oh, yeah. If I want to create a lot of balls, I'll just make an array list that is a type of ball. And I called it balls, doesn't matter, new array list. So if you remember building an array list, this is an empty array list with nothing inside of it right now, but it's ready to go. And then in the constructor of this class, in the constructor of the ball panel class, I decide to write a little loop that will, and I did between 0 and 10. And I said, I used the add method of the array list class, and I created a new ball. Now notice, in this case, I didn't pass anything inside the parentheses for the ball when I'm building an object. Up here, I use the constructor that I get to place it at a certain location with a certain radius, with a certain speed, and a certain color. Where down here, I just said new ball, so I'm using the default constructor. So this is randomizing each ball that gets created. So this is a very quick way to create 10 random balls on the screen as long as I set the ball constructor up correctly. So that, if you understand that, definitely would pause and write this in here. Don't write all this other gibberish. That this other stuff is crazy. We'll get to it eventually. But we just have to create an array list like a line 11 and then initialize that array list using a loop. And I use 10. You could put 100 in there. Now you have 100 balls. It's ready to go. Now they're not going to draw to the screen. They're not going to do anything. We just created them. So we just created 10 balls and we're ready to go. But now we need to somehow figure out how to get them on the screen. So if you remember how we got them on the screen before, I'm going to run back to this class. So don't write this down. To get a ball on the screen, we would set the color and then we would fill the oval. Okay, those two lines of code are making it show up on the screen. So those two lines of code I want to do 10 times. So I think those two lines of code I need in the ball class. I need a way to set the color of the pen and then call the fill oval. Many different ways to design this. I decided in my ball class to make a draw method. So here's my draw method right here. I decided, you know what, I'm going to make a draw method. Now the problem is to make this draw method, if I want to set the color and fill the oval, the draw method needs to accept an object of the graphics class because I need some. Now you could call it G. I just called it GR. You could call it pony. You could call it dog. It doesn't matter what you call it here. But I'm just saying, all right, I'm going to make a draw method inside this ball class that accepts the graphics. And then with that graphics, I'll set the color to be the current C value, which I have control of in this class. And I'll call the fill oval method of the graphics class, passing my current X, Y, and I accepted a radius. So then times 2 is the diameter. But that will draw the oval. So those lines of code right there, I would pause the computer and get them in your ball class. We'll get it the option to draw, but now I have to call the draw method. So I run back over to my ball panel class and I'm like, all right, well, in the constructor of the ball panel class, I know there's a lot of chaos in here. I created the balls, but now in the paint component method, normally, so here's the super.paint component. I'm just going to call my draw method. So this line of code 53 is calling the draw method for that one ball, B1. And notice what I'm doing. It says the draw method says you have to pass it a graphics. So I passed it G because G is the variable name for the graphics that Java creates automatically. Because remember, we don't explicitly call the paint component method. Java calls it, it creates the graphics, calls it G. So I'm then taking the G that got, or the graphics that got created, and quickly passing it over to the ball class, and then the ball class can draw stuff over there. So now this one line of code will draw the ball. But I want to do that 10 times. So then I realize that I need to put it inside of a loop. So if you notice here, and I know there's other methods here with the move and bounce, we'll look at those, but this is saying this is a for each loop. You could do a normal for loop too, it doesn't matter. I just did a for each loop because I want to draw every ball inside of the array called balls. So remember, for each loops, the name of the array or array list or whatever you're trying to go through goes there. The type that is in it goes there. So there's balls in there. And then whatever you want to call everything that comes out goes here. I decided to call it B. So then I say B.draw. This will draw them all on the screen. Okay, so this is a nice little loop to get them all drawn on the screen. This is great design. We got this all working. With one line of code, I'm able to draw 10 balls or 100 balls or 1,000 balls because I designed it well. Well, now I need to get them to move. Okay, so we got to give them the option to move. So in old school, before we did it, we said, all right, to move it, we need to do x plus equals x add. Maybe you have y plus equals y add. We added those variables. So that's our moving. Well, I want to move it. So I'm going to go to my ball class and write a method that allows it to move. So here comes my move method, and it's very, very basic. Same thing. Take its current x value and add its x speed. Instead of x add in this variable, in this method, I called it x speed. And x speed is, one of the instance variables. It comes in here. We randomize it. So when I randomize it, I'm getting a speed between 1 and 4 is what I'm doing right now. So I just keep adding that x speed. So that's pretty easy. So then how do I call that method? I just go into that for each loop and I say move. Now notice this time I do not need to pass it graphics because it's not doing anything. It's not drawing anything. It's just changing an instance variable. So there it is. Just a move method. All right, the bounce is the hardest one. And I know you saw it sitting there right there, but I want to go back how we did it before. So before we drew this ball class, we were checking if it bounced, if the current x value is greater than or equal to width minus the diameter, because that's really the diameter, or if it's less than or equal to 0. You probably did the same thing with y's as well. So you have to do this for both x and y for every ball on the screen. So I'm going to add a method to check to see if it bounces in the ball class. So I run to the ball class. Here's a bounce method. Now here's the issue. If I want to check if it hits the edge of the wall, I need to pass the edges of the wall. So instead of passing the edges of the wall, like the width and the height, I decided to accept the entire panel. So I want to pass the entire panel, and then I can check over here in this class the width or the height of the panel. So this is the same code as before. This is changing it if it hits the left or the right side. You can pause the computer again and write that method. But the reason why I needed to accept the panel is because I need to be able to do those things. Now, maybe instead of JPanel, I put ball panel. I don't know why I have JPanel there, but it works for JPanel as well because the methods that we're using are in the JPanel class. All right, so we're going to run back to our ball panel, which extends JPanel. So this is the cool thing. So if I make a method that accepts a JPanel, and I am in the ball panel class, that I'm at least a JPanel. So I am going to call my method. Here it is, bouncing. And I'm passing myself because I'm currently in the JPanel class because I extended it. So if I write a method that accepts JPanel and I pass this, remember this refers to the current object that is being used to invoke the method. There it is. So there it is, the wonderful code to make it draw it, move it, bounce it. We did it over in the other class. It's fantastic. Don't worry about the stick figure one. You still need your delay loop over here with this try catch action. And you still need your repaint, all of that stuff. You still need to disregard the rest of this nonsense, but that should get 100 balls bouncing around the screen for you, or 10 balls or 20 balls or whatever you want. So hopefully that works for you. Again, pause the computer at any time to be able to do those things, but creating this ball class and then creating a panel that creates objects, array list of objects of the ball class, and then going through and do that. It's pretty awesome. All right. I'll post all the code right next to this video as well.